Ja, återigen får vi blåsa i basunen och peka på se Peter Wagner och New Apostolic Reformation i ett klipp. Öppen teism pratar man om. Det är alltså att begränsa Gud. Att han inte vet eller har kontroll på allting. Precis som om syndafallet då skulle komma som en överraskning för Gud. Nej vänner, Gud är allsmäktig så det är lögn. Sen har man en dualistisk syn i NAR. Och det upphöjer ju Satans makt. Och det är precis som att två olika parter då strider. Som är ungefär lika starka då, men det är ju också en lögn. Och får du denna teologi så får vi givetvis fruktan. Och då behöver vi ju alla dessa bönekrigare som åker omkring och försöker strida och öppna olika lager som står i vägen för den här falska väckelsen som man menar. Latter rain. Man menar också att församlingarna måste byggas om för just detta ändamål, att leda till ett genombrott mot dessa andefurstar. Och det beskrivs som en Joels Armé eller Elia Armé. Mike Bickel var ju en som var i ledningen för det, och vi ser Enarsson och vi har haft Kjell Sjöberg i såna här arméer också. Men eftersom grunden i hela NAR-teologin är byggd på sand är detta en livsfarlig rörelse. Själv tror jag efter en dröm jag hade att detta vi ser just nu är det stora avfallet. Ja, jag drömde om ett stort tåg som såg ut som om man jublade i seger, men det var på väg mot en katastrof. Jag vill läsa ifrån Sefania 3:11 som jag tror talar om det stora avfallet. Sefania 3:11. På den dagen ska du inte längre blygas för alla de överträdelser som du har begått mot mig. Ty då ska jag avskilja från dig dem som jublar så segervisst. I grundtexten står det att han ska göra det från vår mitt, precis som det står i Andra Thessalonikbrevet 2. Och du ska inte längre förhäva dig på mitt heliga berg. Alltså alla de högmodiga som tror med läran som grund då att man är Kristus. Men jag ska lämna kvar i dig ett folk som är ödmjukt och svagt, och de ska förtrösta på Herrens namn. Ja, det är kvarlevan på Sion som ropar efter Gud om hjälp. Kvarlevan av Israel ska inte längre göra orätt, hebreiska laglöshet. Inte heller tala lögn, och i deras mun ska inte finnas en falsk tunga. De ska finna föda och lägga sig ner utan att någon förskräcker dem. Ja, vänner, kvarlevan av Israel. Herrens dag innebär ju dom och en avskiljning av dem som jublar så segervisst. Varsågod och lyssna på klippet.
But all we knew is just these often what they call the generals of the faith in the New Apostolic Reformation movement. Those are the people that we knew.
Mm-hmm.
And when we back up and actually look at the system of the New Apostolic Reformation, I think this was one of the things that was really helpful for us. And I think when our research, when we were able to identify this theological framework, the entire New Apostolic Reformation movement made sense to us in a way that we can actually help those coming out of it. And let's not focus on the churches. Let's not focus on the individual people. Let's help you understand this movement that you're a part of theologically so that we can help reorient you. So it goes like this. So C. Peter Wagner, many know this gentleman is, I wouldn't call him the father of the New Apostolic Reformation movement. We can call him someone who put a term to the movement. And he calls it the sequence. And when he calls it the sequence, he's looking at the historical development of the NAR over the course of the 20th century. So many hear a terminology called the first wave, second wave, and third wave.
Yep.
Well, that is the the historical development from his perspective of the New Apostolic Age, which he said started in around, there's some discrepancy in his point of view, either 1998 or 2001. I argue it's 2001 because that's the year that he introduced open theism in a public way. But when we look at the first wave, we're looking at early Pentecostalism, the Azusa Street Revival. Many have already talked about the roots of the Pentecostal movement. So C. Peter Wagner called that is when God started this Holy Spirit movement on the earth. Fast forwarding to the second wave, in the 50s or 60s, if you will, the charismatic renewal, revival, if you will, kind of the ecumenical movement. Fast forward to the 80s with the bringing back the prophets in his perspective. Yeah. So the second wave was kind of bringing back the intercessors. The third wave is bringing the prophets. And then at that point in the 90s, that was the actual NAR. But what's interesting about that, he was actually laying out this entire theological system, even though he was doing it in the span of kind of a progressive development at NAR, but that is the entire theological system. And it goes like this. Because God chose to limit his sovereignty, and specifically with C. Peter Wagner, he takes the view of open theism in the sense that God has chosen to limit himself. There's some who say that God cannot know the future. C. Peter Wagner really didn't make too much of a distinction of that. He was more along the camp of God just chooses not to know. So either way, God's understanding and foreknowledge of the future is just not there. So because God does not know the future, when Adam and Eve fell into sin, then that whole aspect was unknown to God. So he didn't see the fall. And so at that point, Christ became a contingency plan. And the dominion that was bestowed to Adam and Eve to take dominion of creation was then given to Satan. So then Satan was, and you'll hear it a lot in the New Apostolic movement, that he's the God of this age, and that is absolutely biblical language, but that is very different than what Orthodox Christianity would believe. And so in the God of this age, essentially that this is Satan's dominion, and at that point, God cannot intervene in creation because it is now that dominion and authority has been given to Satan.
I can hear Ken Copeland saying that too.
Exactly, and this really is the foundation. It's not just the NAR, but it's the same theological back end of the prosperity movement as well.
Okay, which is rooted in, kind of the mind science cults. So
it really is. So now we start looking at the idea of spiritual warfare because you have a dualistic cosmos, whereas God is in heaven, and here on earth you have Satan. Did you want to?
Yeah, the dualism really surprised me, and so oftentimes I hear, well, Satan is implanting, Satan is giving me thoughts, Satan knows, and so it really is giving Satan the sovereignty that belongs with God alone. And if God has limited his knowledge, Satan hasn't. Satan has as the God of this world, has whatever all knowledge that we have given him. Which
now, real quick, when we talk about dualism, one of the big dangers of it is you lose the sovereignty of God in the midst of dualism, and you exalt Satan to the same level, and it's basically a duel between equals. And that to me just is bizarre. So this is clearly part of what's going on in the NAR, is that their open theism has led to a duality that makes Satan a heck of a lot stronger than he really is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And with that dominion and sovereignty that Satan has, this is why you need those intercessors, and this is why you have strategic levels spiritual warfare, and why you have so many of these other power ministries, because the spirit of the kingdom of light is needed to push through whatever is out in this cosmos that Satan has. And only when intercessors pray and bring about that can prophets then hear from God. So when we hear breakthrough and we hear that people are getting healed or they're getting this or that because they had a breakthrough, this is what is really meant.
So essentially, if we get a visual picture of it, duality, right? Satan and God, in a world that's almost filled with fog, in that when the intercessors pray, they're praying away this evil, Satan's dominion, into a, quote, breakthrough, like you said, to where now the potentiality that God can do something is now possible because we prayed away this kind of evil dominion of Satan. So when we hear it, things such as the atmosphere, or God, have your presence come into this place, or we want to feel you, we fill this room.
Or even inviting him, because he cannot until we do.
Wow.
So that's step one. Right?
Okay, we got to comment on this. So Dr. Ware, they come to you and they're kind of pitching this idea that they've been exposed to open theism, but it's very clear from what I'm hearing and also having read their dissertations that this is open theism that is now applied. This is applied open theism, not to some kind of speculative open theism. Oh, we just lost the Wares. Hey, it's the Peaches. Nice you guys to come back.
We had a power outage.
We're going to have to start all over again now, you know.
No, we're not. Just don't listen to Ware.
This is what we call Satan thwarting the efforts
I see.
of God. So we need to really work. And I don't mean this to make fun of the theology, but this is what I remember praying, because I would feel burdened by whatever spirit was around that Satan was attacking me.
Yeah.
And the anxiety of that was a lot.
All right, so let me make the point that I was making and where we left off, and I'm going to pitch something to Dr. Ware, because so the point that I see in all of this is that where Pinnock and Boyd are kind of like hypothetical open theists, they're talking about it in the abstract. What the NAR has done is taken open theism and they've created an applied version of this theology. This is applied open theism. And so when you heard about this for the first time from the Peaches, and they've got a linguistic issue, because they've got terminology that isn't classic to open theism, because this is an applied theology. What was your initial thoughts on their hypothesis?
Well, I was surprised that it had that application, because I just didn't know about that. But it made perfect sense, because here was a movement that really did rely upon a diminished God, right? And an exalted Satan. So you have this kind of reducing and elevating going on in ways that are exactly wrong. You know, I mean, you think of the creator-creature distinction, and God is God. Goodness gracious. I mean, you know, he is the omnipotent. He holds Satan's life in his hands moment by moment, could snuff him out like that. There is no competition here between Satan and God. But nonetheless, they have diminished God, and open theism kind of allows for that, because God has decided that he's going to limit himself, right, in not knowing these things that are going to take place in the future, and learning and trying to respond in ways that are needed when he finds out what we do and that sort of a thing. Well, you diminish God in those kinds of ways, and you elevate Satan, and then you end up with this kind of dualism that they've been talking about. And you even see this in the writings of Greg Boyd, who went from his kind of open theism defenses then on to, you know, God at war, and these ideas of this cosmic warfare that's going on between God and Satan. So it's there as well.
Yeah. So if I can come up with like a mental picture of what I'm hearing the Peaches describe, is it's almost as if you have two equally matched football teams on the iron grid. And the prayers and the intercessors are helping to give God the home field advantage, so that a breakthrough would end up being like a touchdown or a field goal or something like that to help God score. Is that a fair way of looking at what it is that you're describing?
Yeah. Well, at least from the openist view, I think they would want to say all of this is because of God's self-condescension, right?
Yeah.
He could have been the God of Reformed theology, who determined everything that comes to pass, but he didn't want that kind of a world. So they would want this caveat to say this was by God's free choice. But nonetheless, once he's made that free choice, you've got this limited God that depends upon our prayers and our actions and those kinds of things in order to get done what needs to be done to fulfill his purposes.
Is it any wonder that canonicism seems to be the going Christology in this movement? The canonic view that Christ lays aside his deity and then does everything he does as a fully submitted and obedient man under the power of the Holy Spirit.
And that's one of the things that I would say surprised me, but didn't surprise me. So in my dissertation, what I was actually looking at is if C. Peter Wagner was an open theist, professed open theist at the end of his life, well, what